everybody, and welcome to Paranormal Nation Radio. Not so normal. How's Denise and Ron doing this evening?
We're great. Hey, Carl, where have you been?
I've been everywhere. No, I'm just feeling better and everything. Still working and getting things done.
Oh, that's good. So we got a call from my sister about a few hours ago about Vincent, and they were able to get him out of bed and sat him in a chair for a couple hours today. And when I was talking to him, it seemed like he could hear us, and he kind of opened his eyes a little bit more when I showed him Piper and Nolan. So that's good, and his pneumonia is doing better. So, but he's still technically in a coma.
Right.
I've never known anybody that's been in a coma, never known anybody while they were in a coma. So there's that. And still no update on my other nephew, but, it's one day at a time with each one of them,
Yeah, that's all we can do is just keep them in our prayers and one day at a time.
Yep. And please,
hey, Jeremy,
please just keep them in your prayers, because I think everything positive is what they need to hear right now. Right. So it sucks, but I tell everybody I worry like you wouldn't believe, but everything I worry about happening never happens. So I feel justified. So that's where I am. And, so that was my good news for today. That seems, it's every day we're getting another piece of good news.
Well, that's good.
So I just want to keep that happening. So people keep those prayers coming. We appreciate them more than you know. And I can't even, and then, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things tonight. So people, please just be aware that some of the stuff we're talking about may not be happy-go-lucky. It might be a little bit more on the sad side. So keep that in mind. Our guest tonight is Natalie Kreider. We've had her on before. I talked to, anybody who listened to my show last night knows that we've had her on before, and it was on Paranormal Nation Radio. And we talked to her in the past about basically strictly paranormal type stuff. And that was back when she lived in Topeka. She moved back home and got involved with the weather. And I'm really interested in what's been going on in the weather, because, we've all spent the 4th of July and on praying for these families that have lost these girls and, lost their families. There's
a lot of people.
It's a lot of people still missing.
Hey, Crystal.
And so we're going to probably talk a little bit about that. So we're going to talk about paranormal. We're going to talk about weather. We're going to talk about Missouri. We're probably going to talk about all kinds of different things. So
the weather affects Bigfoot.
Yeah. Does weather affect Bigfoot? I get that it just makes him smell worse.
Right.
It smells like wet dog. So,
right.
Hey, Tim.
But yeah, I'd like to welcome Natalie Kreider to the show.
Hello, Natalie. Hello.
Hey, Nigel.
Hi, Nigel.
So
you're late, Nigel.
Thank you, Nigel.
I think he's on there before we are.
Sometimes.
Yeah, usually he is.
Yeah.
So like I said, we had you on when you were in Topeka.
Correct.
You moved, and I think we've had you on since then. But when you first moved back, I know back to Missouri, you got involved with weather watching, weather spotting, and all this other stuff, and storm chasing. What made you get involved in that?
So I'm actually kind of like with the paranormal, third generation. My grandmother did it. My parents did it. My uncle was a storm spotter in the Springfield, Missouri area. So it's kind of just always been there. I've always been fascinated when it comes to weather and storms, especially tornadoes. They just kind of seem to be my thing. I remember being at the county fair, and we had a storm come through. Everyone was seeking shelter in the auditorium, and I took off running from my grandparents. And I remember at the time, like, they had all the wires for all the different booths and stuff taped down. I remember just kind of like hopping over those as I was running, and I got underneath the Ferris wheel, and it was swaying back and forth. The tents and stuff were flying everywhere. It was quite interesting. I had a blast. My grandparents were terrified to death. It was a good time. Good memory for me, at least.
Well, we didn't live too far from Topeka, so we lived in Kansas City and we lived in Lewisburg. Carl lives in Cameron, or up near Cameron, up past there in Gallatin.
Mom.
And so, we've all witnessed horrible storms. The big one, the Andover one, and that was down towards Wichita. He was in that tornado. That the one where they come out and they tell everybody, "Don't hide underneath the bridge." But that was the only place to hide at the time.
No, it could have gotten a little bitty wood shack that was going back and forth, and
it got blown away anyway.
But, it is definitely recommended not to be under the overpasses, and same thing like being in your vehicles. But there are instances where there are no other options. So while it's not ideal, it's not recommended. You do have to do what is best in that situation. I think I would probably try and find a culvert or some type of covering. The biggest thing is that it just creates this wind vortex. It just makes the wind stronger.
Yeah. Well, I tell you,
the problem is you really couldn't see anything. It was raining so hard.
Yep.
And
in the culvert, you could have drowned.
Unfortunately, you have to kind of juggle your options, and not all of them are the greatest.
How do I want to die? Do I want to get sucked out by the tornado, or do I want to drown?
Right. I don't know.
I guess I would have had a better option under the bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably. At least you might have something to hold on to.
Yeah, it was an exit on a turnpike going down to Wichita, and it was a highway patrol exit. They had a little highway patrol little shack, and when the whole thing was over, somehow, some way, nobody hit each other. I mean, the cars we were parked in every direction you could think of. Some were a couple inches from hitting another car, but somehow no one got hit. Like I said, you couldn't see.
Right.
I said, I knew I was coming up on the exit, and I said, I had the wipers going as fast as I can go. And as soon as I got off where I thought I was close to the, little building, I just stopped. Because I didn't want to go any further because I couldn't see.
Right.
Right.
But
yeah, it sounds like you made the right choice. Obviously, you're still here and you're able to talk about it. So, good job.
When the highway patrol is in there, he's listening to the weather reports. It says, it's one coming headed this way. And the building's just shaking. I'm looking around. There's a couple other guys, and I'm like, man, this building doesn't look like it's going to hold up. And they said, no. I did see the bridge like right there. And I said, that's a lot better than my truck or in this building. So we made a run for it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of modern day buildings just are not built in the way that they should be in order to withstand a lot of that. That's a big issue. And, everybody keeps talking about how Tornado Alley and all of that keeps, it's moving, it's shifting. And I don't think it's so much as it's moving as it is that it's expanding. But we're seeing areas that are getting hit consistently, more frequently. I know here in the St. Louis area, we had like 3 different tornadoes within a couple of months during this season, and they all just kind of like danced around my house. One was 2 exits up the road from me. So, it's those kinds of things, but homes just are not built the way that they should be. And for places like Kansas and Missouri, Oklahoma, we're accustomed to that kind of weather. We're accustomed to the storms. We kind of anticipate that is going to happen at some point in the year. But with that also comes complacency at times. And people are like, oh, yeah, we're used to it. It's not going to hit me. It's going to go around me. It always. St. Louis has this thing that, a tornado never hits St. Louis because of the arch. For some reason, the arch has like this magical power being on the river. And while a lot of times storms do weaken and then intensify once they go over, it's not that they're just missing us. We just got lucky in that sense. Right. But this year, I think, definitely showed that. We had the EF3 that went through downtown St. Louis. And I had just moved out of St. Louis, and it ended up touching down just on the other side of my apartment. So where I had been living was affected, because that's when it went through Forest Park for the zoo and all of that. And then, of course, a few weeks later, we had the other one that was in Chesterfield, which is just 2 exits from me.
Yeah, that's not too far from Ron's mom.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we've seen so many different weather events. You know, the 500-year flood in Kansas City, the 100-year flood in Kansas City 2 years before.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so apparently there was no mathematician involved in those.
Absolutely.
And then we had the 500-year snow here this year. But we watch all this stuff and we wonder, you know, like, so we all saw what unraveled over the weekend with the perfect storm just sitting there in Texas, and 2 rivers and a stream all flooding at the same time into these valleys. And, you know, when you think about the power of water, and this is twice in 8 months, you know, Asheville, North Carolina should not have been hit by a tropical storm. You know, where we were at the time,
they'd had rain every day for 2 weeks.
Right.
That was the problem.
Our daughter lives
Every
in
day.
South Carolina. We happened to be in South Carolina when that storm hit. We were in a hotel, no power, all this crap. None of this, you know, so I told the guy, I said, yeah, we live in Florida. And I said, we left Florida, not because of the storm, because we had planned to be gone. I said, but we had to come to South Carolina to experience our first tropical storm.
Right.
As Floridians, you know, not that we hadn't had one before, because we'd been in a tropical storm in Galveston, but there's all these people that are saying that it was weather manipulation that caused all this. And I don't think it was on either one of them.
No, I don't think so. The most recent one, especially with Texas right now, is the cloud seeding. I've been hearing about that left and right. And I mean, yeah, and that's a can of worms all of its own. Like, yes, there is cloud seeding that does exist, but not to the extent of what everybody makes it out to. Cloud seeding only increases rain by no more than 20%. And what they had done, it was like a day or two prior leading up to the storm, which we knew that storm was coming in. Mm-hmm. What they had done with cloud seeding, that had already dissipated. The issue with the storm that came in, it came in from the tropical storm that we had going on. We knew that rain was a part of it. But as storms move further inland, they lose their intensity. They become more just rain, things like we typically see. What we weren't expecting was there was a heat dome in place, but it wasn't as strong as what we had thought it was going to be. And when that heat dome isn't there, without getting super technical, it wasn't able to dissipate in the way that it should have, which allowed it to drop so much rain so fast. And you got to think, yeah, there were warnings, but Texas Hill Country is used to flooding. They're used to this kind of weather within reason. But if you have something with hills and mountains, everything else, all of that rain that goes up top, it's not collecting, it's running downhill. And that valley is going to collect it. On top of it, you had that pretty much drought that was going on. The ground was so dry, and then you put all that water, it takes a hot minute for things to absorb. So you had so many different things coming into place, and then you top it off with it being the holiday. People were in from out of town. I think that's why we're now starting to see a much higher number in missing, because people didn't even know that their loved ones were in the area. And now we're starting to piece that together. That's personally just my opinion on that. But you have these areas when this came in at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and we're seeing video showing that it rose 20, almost 30 feet in 45 minutes.
Yeah,
that's an insane amount of water. That's insane.
That's more than the Niagara Falls drops in 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
That's what people need to understand. 3 or 4 days. So...
And I think when people hear wall of water...
Hold on 1 second. Matt, we got your comments. We'll be asking your question here in just a few minutes. I don't want you to think that we deleted your comment or anything.
Yeah,
we do have it.
Deleted.
Yeah, it's just rolled up. So we'll ask your question, I promise. So go ahead.
Oh, there's just so many things that played a factor into this. The warnings, the timing. I mean, anybody can think, oh yeah, we're used to flooding. Yeah, it's going to flood. People knew that, but we didn't expect that. There are some things that we can control, and there are some things that we can predict. But Mother Nature does what Mother Nature does, and there are some things that we can't control. The most that we could do and that we saw firsthand was that when things started to go south, people automatically jumped into action. And that is the important part, because we could have lost, unfortunately, a lot of lives were lost. And that is absolutely heartbreaking. But a lot of lives were also saved very quickly because of the action, because people jumped in and were a part of those rescues, where some lives were lost from first responders, because those are the ones that are trained in swift water rescue. They're trained in all of this. But no matter how much training you have, there are just some factors you can't control. And that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, giant tree hitting you when you jump in the water to try to save somebody. Or a car coming that's floating.
Car, refrigerator.
Yeah, you just don't know what's going to happen.
I went floating a couple weekends ago, and we ended up having a pop-up thunderstorm while I was on the river. And we spent 30 minutes with a monsoon coming down on us, standing on the bank watching the river rise and that current pick up. And we still had like another 4 or 5 miles to go. So that was an interesting float trip. But it's things like that. Like, if you're not... You can't always be prepared for everything. You can plan for it, but there's some things you just can't prepare for.
Yeah. So were you on the Merrimack?
No, I was actually on Big River.
Oh, okay. Because the Merrimack does that quite frequently.
Yeah. And unfortunately, similar to like with this, Big River is not meant for free swimming. It is meant for floating canoes, kayaking. And unfortunately, that same day that I was floating, we did have a drowning. A father with his 2 teenage sons were down there, and he went under the water, and unfortunately on his way to the hospital, he didn't make it. And then within, I think, the day after, there were 2 others that almost ended up drowning as well. So it's, even if even if you've been doing it for years, there are warnings for a reason, and there is caution. And we were just talking about this right before the show, that after the Texas flooding, that we were seeing people in rafts floating down the Guadalupe River with no care in the world. And for me, I find that extremely disrespectful. I get it. You're on holiday and stuff, but there is live rescue going on. Yeah. And people have lost their lives. The river is clearly dangerous, and you're floating down it. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me.
No.
They had their beer muscles, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to ask this question from Matt.
Sure.
If I can find my mouse to get it to the right computer. Okay. He asks, what are your thoughts on the Native American dead man walking tornadoes?
So with dead man walking, when we're seeing the multiple vortices, which is what we see in these type of tornadoes, sometimes even in the larger ones, we've been able to see multiple areas of rotation, so multiple vortexes. I'm not sure, as far as like from a paranormal standpoint, if it necessarily has any connection with Native American beliefs. I think this just does tie into the weather side of things. But that's also not to say that it doesn't. It's just not something that I'm most familiar with, or that I've done a lot of research personally in. I think this is just a phenomenon of its own. I think people tend to, similar like with pareidolia in the paranormal, I think people put a lot of emphasis into certain things. And we try to find things that we can relate to. And we know that these multiple vortices and some of these stronger tornadoes cause such significant damage. And we sometimes tend to see higher death counts when we have this type of damage. And I think we kind of put it together with that. I don't necessarily think there's anything connected with Native American history. If I were to say that if the dead man walking type tornadoes were only happening in areas where there was a significant Native American presence, then maybe I could see that. But we've seen dead man walking in areas that don't have a rich history with Native American type beliefs and practices.
Yeah. Well, I'd say you probably see something similar with wildfires.
Yeah.
I don't think, a lot of people will say, they'll be looking at fire and they'll go, "Do you see that person in that fire?" And it's like, there's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the shape. Sometimes we see this stuff and we want to make it human. We want to make it something that we can relate to, whether we can or not. It's just the way that it is. Do you think that there is a connection between paranormal activity and weather?
Absolutely. So we know that water in general is a conduit for energy. We see them at water mills when they produce electricity that way. So we have noticed a trend in haunted locations or haunted activity that takes place on or near large bodies of water, rivers, streams, creeks, things like that. Even some of these underground springs, I've seen homes or businesses that have been built on top of them. We have a town about an hour south of me in DeSoto, Missouri, and they have some springs that their buildings have been built on top of, and those tend to have activity. So there is a correlation when it comes to water. Weather, a big part of it is water. A big part of it is energy. And we see this with lightning. Lightning is that static electricity, the hair on your arms stand up before there's a strike. Those are just some signs. So we know that energy is something that the paranormal can use to communicate, to manifest. So I find that when we're investigating during storms, activity tends to be a little bit stronger. And I think that's just because they have this consistent flow of energy source of food that's being provided to them. One of the pieces of equipment that we use, that one of my investigators, Kelly, has, is a Tesla coil. So anytime we have a location and we're communicating, and sometimes they're like, "I don't have enough energy, like I need more energy." Or it just kind of gets quiet. Sometimes we'll bring out the Tesla coil, we'll let it go for a little bit. It produces that electricity in the air, and then we notice that activity tends to pick up. So I think the same thing happens with weather. I think also in instances where we have, let me backtrack. With the paranormal, we have the residual energy that is left over. And a lot of times we see this happen from traumatic events. This can be from murder, car accidents, but also natural disasters. And I think that in some moments, I think it is very possible. I have not come across it personally, but I think that the possibility of there being spirits stuck, energy that continues to replay itself out because their lives were taken so fast from natural disasters, whether it be tornadoes, hurricanes, whatever. I think that's possible that there's still a correlation with that. And I think that if their life was taken from a situation like a natural disaster, that when similar elements replay themselves out, I think that just kind of reinvigorates the activity and what's going on. And I think we can tend to see that might play out again during that time when maybe a storm comes through.
Yeah. We saw that with lightning at the Sally house.
Well, any location we've ever been.
Yeah.
Where we got a storm with lightning.
Yeah.
It all went up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Every time.
But snow, not so much. It seems to be really quiet.
It is quiet.
I've never investigated when it's been snowing. It's been cold. I've been outside investigating. I've never investigated when it's been snowing. But I have wondered about thunder snow.
Have it.
We had quite a bit of thunder snow earlier this year, back in January. And I always wondered if, similar with lightning, giving off the energy, if thunder snow would have affected it the same way.
Well, thunder snow is still, there's still lightning involved. You just don't notice it as much.
Right.
But the other thing that seems to be, like when the ground cracks, when it's so cold, you hear that
oh yeah,
that ice boom.
Yeah.
I wonder if that has anything to do with, because I mean, when it's that bad, I guarantee we're not all out paranormal investigating in a place with no heat.
That's why we didn't go anywhere.
I've done it a couple of times, and it is not at the top of my list of things to do. But then again, the dead heat of summer with no AC probably isn't nearly as great either. You can put on as many layers as you want in the cold, but you can only take so many off before it becomes indecent exposure.
Yeah. We had a friend who said, you've heard of Naked and Afraid? He goes, I think people should paranormal investigate naked. And I go, no, that'd be scarier.
Right.
I said, have you seen most of the paranormal investigators? Most of them are not in the best of shape.
Right.
Or we're old, So it's like, no, I don't think so.
We're trying to communicate with the spirits. We're not trying to scare them away. We're not trying to double dead them at that point.
Yeah. Or they'd go, oh, we're out of here. They'd cross over just instantly.
I'm sure there are plenty of ghostly eye rolls at some of the questions and the things that we do.
Oh, I guarantee it. But yeah, like Ron said, you need to go to Iowa. We go to Iowa, it's either 110 or, it's 60 degrees on the way there. And as soon as we cross the state line, snow.
Right.
And by morning, we're sitting there going, I don't know how we're going to get home.
When I was in Iowa last month, I was out at the Mason House and doing an investigation there. And I had driven out there early that morning because we ended up going on a float trip since it sits right there on the Des Moines River. So we went floating for like an hour and a half and then came back, got ready, and did an investigation that night. But yeah, you're right, because it was just hotter than blazes outside when we were there. And then by that evening, it was fine.
Yeah, we don't have, I don't know.
It was cloudy on my drive there.
Yeah, it feels like 100 degrees here almost every day. But that's because from the humidity.
Right.
But yeah, we've never been to the Mason House. We've been to
highly recommend it. It is truly a hidden gem. It's one that I am finding myself frequently going back to. I'm actually going back this weekend. Kelly and I will be out there investigating, just kind of doing our own personal, because normally we're out there with groups. Normally we're out there leading groups. And we've got 2 investigations that we're hosting through Darkly Obscured in August and then in October, right before Halloween. So with those, we'll be investigating out there. But the place is a 24/7. It's running B&B. So people can rent out the rooms at any time and then investigate on top of it. It's well worth it. Well worth it.
Where is the Mason House? I've heard of it, but I don't know where it is.
Piasaquah or Benton Sport, Iowa. It's in the southern, far southern half. It's about 3 hours north of St. Louis.
Did you say Benton?
Benton Sport.
Oh, okay. So that's with Josh and oh shit, the one who had the heart attack. Josh and shit, I can't remember her name suddenly. And
her.
Yeah, her.
I was thinking of him.
Yeah.
Had a heart.
Josh is married to. She wrote a book about the Mason House and the Benton County Historical Society, and I've had them on.
That's the ones that live in Minnesota.
I probably have her book on my bookshelf then, because I bought all of it. Yeah, it's on my bookshelf in the living room.
I didn't know where it was.
Remember, she was pregnant when we were at that paranormal conference. So, and like I said, I've interviewed her twice, and suddenly I can't remember her name. I can remember Josh, but suddenly I can't remember her.
Yep.
And
got a question.
We got a question. Oh.
From Michael Roberts.
Who in the hell is he?
He's a storm chaser.
Mike,
we have a question.
and Mike are storm chasers as well
Yeah.
in Springfield, Missouri.
Good place to do it.
And he asks, have you ever had a paranormal experience while chasing tornadoes?
I wish. I would love to say that I've had the two crossover. The closest I've had is investigating when there's been a severe thunderstorm. I was in Paducah, Kentucky a couple months ago, back in March, and we had tornado warnings going off at the time during our investigations, but that was probably the closest. As somebody who is sensitive, as somebody who's communicated with the other side, and all the other stuff that kind of comes along with being an investigator, for me, there have been times when I have been out trying to help with search and rescue and recovery that I have had spirits come through. I've had passerbys. I've had that sensation that somebody is there. But to say directly having the two while I'm chasing, not so much. It's usually been after the fact.
So, and the Mason House in Bed and Breakfast has said that that's not them, but she is related to the Benton County Historical Society, the person I'm talking about. So we're good. Different houses, different places, but we're good.
Yeah. Chris and Fee are the owners of the Mason House. And let me tell you, I've been to a lot of locations. I've been to a lot of places where we've been able to lodge there after the investigation. And top tier, there's nothing like this place. It just gives you that feeling when you pull in of, I'm home. And you're just so comfortable and you don't want to leave. And you can tell that there is so much love and respect that goes into the place. And the spirits also let you know just how much they appreciate it. And they're so eager to communicate and to talk. This place has never let me down. When I've gone out there, we've always had some kind of communication come through.
Yeah.
What do you usually get?
So a lot of it is through our equipment, through EMF spikes. EVPs are pretty big. Seeing shadows. Some people have seen apparitions. Hearing disembodied voices have been pretty big. Photos. Photos and video, you tend to see not so much on the orb side of things, but more of shadows, figures.
Any distortion?
I'm sorry?
Any distortion in the pictures?
Yeah.
Like it's fine here, but over here it's all weird?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things I always say is, like, make sure that you don't move, but take multiple photos back to back, because usually one of them has something with it. Yeah, we've captured quite a bit while we've been there. The Estes method is favorite by far. I love doing it. Guests absolutely love it. The spirits really communicate through it. We like to actually set up 2 different Estes sessions at the same time. And we kind of test things out because we'll do just one. So everybody's asking questions, and the one person is under with the blindfold, noise canceling headphones, in the spirit box. But then we'll have a second one. Sometimes we'll put them in the same room on the opposite ends. And we find more times than not, they actually are communicating with each other, not so much with us asking questions. So we find that to be quite interesting. And then sometimes I'll stick them in a totally different part of the building, or out off the property, while the other one is in the room where I'm at. And we'll have recordings of what's being asked and what's going on. And again, we find that a lot of conversations are going back and forth, or that things that we're asking, they're getting answers for.
We've had dueling echo box sessions where where they're talking to each other, not paying attention to what we're doing, and everything's related to the spirits, but not anything that we're talking about.
Yep.
So it's always very interesting when they do that. And Matt, you don't talk too much. Questions, we love questions.
Yep.
And if we don't like your question, we'll tell you where to go. But but you know what? Even if we don't like your question, I guarantee we're going to ask it.
Well, and I also think, at least for me, I haven't seen anybody actually talk about the correlation between the paranormal and weather. This is a first, even for me. Like, it's something I personally talk about, but not something that I've actually been asked questions about outside of just basic conversation with people.
Well, people need to know, first off, that there are triggers for everything.
Yeah.
And weather is huge energy. So, I've heard people saying stuff along the lines of they live on fault lines and they have a lot of paranormal activity.
Mm-hmm.
St. Louis, for example, is right on the New Madrid Fault.
Yep.
But is it? I mean, we all know that if rocks are hitting each other, they're causing sparks.
Right. They're constant shifting with the plates. That's not necessarily something that's uncommon. I know the last few months we've actually seen an uptick in some earthquakes. We saw quite a few volcanoes erupting from around the place. We had a lot of these really severe storms. So I know a lot of people were kind of putting those together. I did have a few months where activity did seem to be increasing.
Mm-hmm.
In correlation with some of this stuff. It could just be a coincidence. Personally, I don't think enough attention has really been put into study if there is in fact a correlation between them. I think it's just something that we have documented in our notes as to what the weather was at the time when we were investigating, but to really pinpoint it, I don't think a lot of people have really done a lot of research on that.
So we have a question here that might be helpful.
Well, she was talking about what was that called last? Brought it up last night.
We'll come back to your question here in a second, Matt. The Schumann resonance.
She was talking about Earth and things like that. This is related.
This is related to that. The wavelength of the Earth breathing is what our guest last night was talking to us about. I don't think he was talking to us about it on the show, but
I had never heard of it.
I haven't heard of it, at least it put that way. But I think I understand what they're saying and what they're referring to with that. Because the Earth is constantly shifting and changing. It's constantly moving. And in a sense, I guess you could say breathing. And I think any kind of change with that, there's so many factors to it. There really is, because not only are you dealing with the paranormal, not only are you dealing with natural scientific weather, but you're also going to start, kind of like with Native American, tapping into a religious side with it too. Dealing with, if you believe with spirituality, when you're dealing with elementals and stuff like that, those are all different things that play a factor. Because witchcraft and all of that goes with the paranormal as well. So when you have something like that, I think the breathing, the Earth breathing, it's shifting. I think all those different things send off a chain of events. And some are minor, some we don't even notice. And then sometimes they're on a grander scale. And they are things that we notice. But there has to be a repetition with them, usually, unless we're actually looking for them, for us to even notice that they're happening. And I think with the series of events that have been going on within the last couple of years, I think we're starting to see an uptick in that.
So we're going to go back to Matt's comment. Has there been evidence pointing towards a correlation between Native American burial sites? There has been. Okay. And violent tornadoes. Do you have any insight into that at all?
I personally don't. Again, it's not something that I have done a lot of research in. Definitely something I am open to looking into, to seeing if there is. I try to avoid Native American sites out of respect, because that is something all of its own. That is a very old practice, and one that I think should be respected in its own right. And so, unless I absolutely have to, unless I'm dealing with a case that specifically is tied with it, I try to avoid messing when it comes to Native American type activity. There's been a few times where I've had to do offerings and help cleanse and help move on, but that is something that is so deeply embedded into our history and into the earth itself that's connected. That a lot of times with Native American activity, it's there as a protection. It's there to protect the land, to protect whatever the life that was there. So it's not necessarily something that was a bad thing. But some theories that I have heard, I again don't really know a whole lot on it to really say one way or the other. But some believe that, when we have so many bad things happening, so many misfortune, life being lost, war, battles, arguments, all these negative things in the world, the universe, God, whomever you might believe in, it goes, okay, I've let you try to handle this on your own. It's time to clean house. Mm-hmm. And then we start seeing all these things happen and all these ways of the earth taking back over what was its before it was ours. And some believe that that is what we're currently seeing. And if you go with that mindset on it, you could say that in those areas with what's happened, whether it be grave sites or it be just the land itself, seeing those things are taking what is no longer good for the earth and getting rid of it.
Yeah, it's a rebirth.
Yeah.
So we have a question here from Tim Betts. And what do you think about flat Earth? I'm going to say it's only flat where you're standing. Everywhere else, it's a circle.
Right.
I'm not. Of course you would, Tim. Of course. That's just Tim.
Okay, good. I'm glad you know him, because I guarantee when I said we will ask any question, even if it's stupid, this wasn't a stupid question.
Reptilians too?
So
sovereign citizen?
I don't think it's flat. I really don't. You can try and convince me otherwise, but hey, if that's what helps you sleep at night, though, if that's what makes you feel better, like, more power to you.
We have tides that prove it's round.
Yeah. Here everything's downhill. From where we live, it's all downhill too.
It is flat here.
But it's flat like this.
Right.
Just, like I said, it's all going downhill. But I wonder how many people researched over the week, since 4th of July,
right,
if they live in a flood zone. Because I did. I checked to see when was the last flood to hit where we live. Thank goodness only 11 properties were affected the last time that there was a flood here, and that was in the, what did I say, in the 70s, 80s?
This downtown has never flooded.
Yeah.
There's a river runs, right through it.
3 rivers run right through it. Blackwater River and Yellow River. And another
as far as I'm concerned on it, there are areas that are more prone to flooding than others. But as far as I'm concerned, under the right circumstances, any area can be a flood zone.
Oh, yeah, again.
But
that's one of the things that we
flood zones are
about.
picked because of insurance. Where I lived, we kept having, where I grew up, we used to have a lot of floods that came through, and we had them wipe out the neighborhood a few times. So they rezoned, and some of those homes were left there to just fall apart because they couldn't do anything now that they were zoned. When I lived there again years later, it flooded again while I was there. Mm-hmm. Apparently I have really bad luck when it comes to floods. So when we were there, the issue was that the flood zone stopped at the bottom of my driveway because I had like a 5-10% increase in my driveway to go up, and then where I lived sat on top. Even though it flooded and it affected us and destroyed all of our stuff, we were considered outside that flood zone simply because there was a slight increase in the hill. That was the only difference.
Yeah. And
I think any place under the right circumstances, like with Texas, they had a flood zone. They had a flood area where they were like, at so many feet, this is considered flooding. And we just saw a new record set because of it.
Catastrophic flooding is, it's a huge thing. How many times Okay, you might have been a kid in 93, in 95. But I remember watching on the news somebody on a boat hitting the levee north of St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Coming, and I had just come across that bridge right after, you know, I was coming back from Kentucky, and I was coming across that bridge, and within 5 minutes, that levee was broken, and I would have been underwater if I had not been trying to get home. Hell,
Right.
if I didn't have to pee, I wouldn't have been in a big hurry. But we've all seen what catastrophic flooding can do.
Yep.
And I hope to God, one of the things that you said that we're not going to gloss over is, do you think that this is going to make people pay attention and not be desensitized to the weather warnings that are coming?
I hope so.
I mean,
I hope so for their sake and for the sake of the responders and the volunteers that go out there to rescue them after the fact. Every warning, every watch should be taken serious, because it doesn't take long for things to change. And sometimes, no matter how many people you have watching a radar, sending out warnings, sometimes things happen so fast. We've had tornadoes, we've had spin-ups that happen, and it actually happened to me earlier this year. My chase partner and I were chasing here in Missouri, down in the Bonne Terre, Potosi area. And we had the storm. The radars were not showing rotation at all. They were strong. The elements were there, but there was no rotation. And we look up, and the funnel's directly above us. And by the time, because there's about an 7-8 minute lapse between each scan on the radar. From that time, from the original scan, there was nothing. The funnel, the tornado, crossed over the top of us, on the other side, topped the trees. By the time that next scan came out, it was there.
Yeah.
And then by the next one, it was gone. And it happens so fast. And sometimes there are things that we just can't get those warnings out fast enough. No matter how good technology is, no matter how good the people watching the radars are. I mean, you've got people that have schooling, that have training, and then you have some that are self-taught. Like for me, like I'm in the process of getting ready to go to school for meteorology, but I'm self-taught on every other front. But my experience, right? And
I knew what to look for. Every tornado I ever saw, I knew what to look for, and I knew when it was coming. I knew where to look.
And living in areas that are prone to that, that's something that we grew up with. But if you're not raised in those areas, then you may not know what to look for.
That's true.
And people, like I said earlier, get complacent. It's not going to happen to me. Oh, we had one go through last year, and it was like a mile down the road. Like, we're fine. Took out the neighbor's house, but left mine. You just got lucky.
Yeah. I mean, how many times has there been a tornado where you've seen, they tell people, get in your basement, and all the neighbors are outside watching?
That's all of Missouri.
Yeah, all of Missouri, all of Kansas. And I have to tell you, it's the same here in Florida, because, we have tornado season from January to March, and then during hurricane season. And so it's the same here.
We saw the tornadoes in Florida last year during the hurricane.
Oh yeah, my nephew was here for that. The one that's in a coma right now. He was over there in Fort Pierce doing cleanup from the tornado over there that happened, because they were going to send them down to, where was it? Sarasota. They were sending them to Sarasota to hold out for the hurricane. And I said, no, don't. You tell your boss you got to go somewhere else, because that's where it's going to hit. And it did. You know, I said, you need to go somewhere else. So they moved them to Fort Pierce, and they ended up being in the middle of the tornadoes.
Yeah, I got tornadoes.
Well, and that's different. Like with hurricanes, we tend to see them forming, and as they progressively move forward, and they either strengthen or they weaken as they're coming into town, you have a little bit more time to kind of judge which direction it's going to go. Obviously, there's some things that changed last minute. We saw that last year. All of last year was just absolutely insane. But with tornadoes, we see the storms. But from the moment that we have the right elements and the rotation, and from the time that it goes from forming that funnel to the point in which it touches down and becomes a tornado, can happen within seconds, if not minutes. I mean, it happens so fast. And hurricanes last over a long period of time. As they move in, they weaken.
Yeah,
tornadoes
warning that it's going to come.
Yeah, they can intensify and then start to weaken and then intensify again. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's just so much that is unknown in that, and that is what makes it so deadly. That's what makes it something that people need to pay attention to. We had the Joplin tornado, and people were getting warnings, but they were completely dismissing it. And I get it. Like, I grew up in Springfield. That's my hometown. And yeah, we get a lot of warnings. We get a lot through there. But most times we just blow it off. And unfortunately, that is one of those moments where people blew it off and they should have taken it seriously. Everything should be taken seriously. I'd rather be wrong a million times than right and not have done anything about it.
Yeah. Well, I know that during the holiday weekend, there were flooding and rescues in Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
So Springfield gets the most worst weather.
A lot of weather, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when we were in Kansas City, it was Omaha and Springfield. You know, you'd be watching it and it'd go, this thing's coming at you, and it'd go like this and miss us and go down and hit Springfield, and they'd get an ice storm, and go to Omaha and they'd get a blizzard, and Carl would get ice and snow, and we'd go, we didn't get anything. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it's like here, I've got the Missouri River, we have the Mississippi, we have Big River, we have the Merrimack. We've got all of these different things, and those all produce that moisture barrier. And that's why we see storms act the way that they do. But those things can change. It doesn't take a lot.
So I want to go back to Matt's comment here.
Yeah,
because he wants to know a little bit more. He says there's hundreds of Native American grave sites that were moved to build more Oklahoma, and they have had more violent storms per capita in the world. And you watch it on the news all the time. It seems they get slammed
all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, more have had a lot of very devastating tornadoes. Honestly, unless it's out there and I'm not aware of it, I don't think there has been any studies on the correlation between the two. With history and the way it trends, I think that there's a possibility. I think that it's worth looking into. I think if somebody was to actually research it, they may actually uncover some interesting information. And like I said earlier, the weather and paranormal tend to not cross paths. Like, we know about it when it comes to energy, but beyond that, they really don't cross paths. And partially that is because they're superstition. Not everybody believes in the paranormal. And weather is easier to believe in than ghosts for a lot of people. So to believe that a disaster is happening, that lives are being taken because of the supernatural, is a lot harder for people to wrap their heads around. But I can't rule it out. I don't have any facts or information or anything to prove otherwise. So I can't prove that it is, but I also can't discount that it's not.
So I'm going to stick to tornadoes for another minute here. Tim says, in April, Salina, Kansas had a tornado warning and no one took it seriously. People were outside watching it and driving around it as if, and the thing went through the town, and many people are dead.
Yep.
And it's like I said, I don't know how many times I saw people that soon as that storm would come, you'd see it coming from the southwest, I think it's from the southwest. They'd be coming in, our house faced west, and they'd be sitting out on the front porch watching it, or standing out in the yard going, sky's green, I hear a train. Okay, well, we had one tornado touchdown over there in Cleveland, Missouri, but it went right over our town. One time it hit a graveyard in our town.
I watched one headed toward your work one day.
Yeah. I was
on the phone with you telling you when it was going to hit you.
Yeah, I was at work, and I was the emergency, I was the disaster contact for the building. And I was having to tell our top dogs for the business that I was in to get down more floors because the tornado is right on top of us. And they're going, how do you know? I said, my husband's telling me,
So they're watching it.
And I mean, this thing, people put it on YouTube. You could see it going right above the building that I was in.
We had chasers on the ground for it. I wasn't there personally, but I remember watching on radar. And unfortunately, the sad part for it all is I think that unless you have truly been affected by the devastation, it doesn't sink in. You can hound it into somebody a million times that this is what you need to do, but until you've lost everything, it just doesn't stick. And partially, I think over the years and as the generations go on, I think we've become very lax on training, on getting the younger generations aware and prepared for those type situations. I think that's something that we could potentially do better on. I know, like with Wicked Weather right now, we're rolling out a new program where we're doing these weather informative programs with local school districts. So that's something that we've started because we want to get that information out there to protect and to keep these kids safe and to make them prepared and everybody else along the way. If you understand something, if you have the knowledge, you're going to be able to react and make informative decisions a lot better. Like with that, I think with Salina, Kansas, unfortunately, we see it everywhere. But as a chaser, as somebody who is watching the radar, or if you're physically there, when you're seeing this happen and you're seeing these people standing outside, all you want to do is scream at them. You want to yell at them. And when you're watching that radar and you can see the debris ball, you can see all of it, and you know it's heading directly towards a town, highly populated, whatever it might be, all you can do is hold your breath because you have pushed those warnings. You have tried to get the warnings out there to people as fast and as accurately as you can. And you just hold your breath and you pray that they listened, that somebody's life was saved because you got that information out there. And that is what we do. That is a big part of, as a storm chaser, and a big part of, with me being a part of Wicked Weather, why I love being a part of it. Because our focus is on saving lives. It's getting those warnings out there and getting them out there accurately and in advance so that you have that time to seek shelter, so that you can make those informative decisions.
Yeah, I think that the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. In this case, the prevention is worth it if it can keep people from having to be rescued.
Yep.
Or recovered, because it's sad to watch. And, I feel like we're watching it on replay right now from Hurricane Helene.
Yep.
So,
and it's frustrating because the people who are not taking it seriously and then find themselves in trouble are now not only just risking their lives, but they're risking the lives of the first responders that are now having to go out there and rescue them. And that's frustrating because, especially when one or both of them end up not surviving, it could have been avoided. Their lives could have still been saved because they listened.
Yeah. Well, humans are hard-headed.
Yep.
And tourists.
And tourists are the worst, but
right.
Double red flag.
Yeah. Dave Harding asks, do you believe in apparitions? He's seen several in his life.
Yes. So I started out as a skeptic when I was younger. I think a lot of us have really started there. It wasn't until, oh Lord, I was 10. Well, no, I'd probably say earlier because I grew up with spirits in the home. I had a trickster that lived there. The name was George. And I saw him quite a bit. But I had my first serious, like, apparition, full body, walk up to me. I will say fight or flight takes a really long time to kick in that situation. But yes, I believe in apparitions. I've seen it. I've experienced it. It still kind of shocks me every time it does happen, even though it's become part of the norm for me on investigations. But it's still one of those that you have to take a second and kind of go, did I see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. And then when you have the evidence, or you have somebody who isn't even aware that you saw it also confirm that you saw it, just adds to it. But yeah,
the minute that you're not skeptical about what you saw, you're desensitized.
Right. You should always question everything. Always question.
So we're gonna ask Susan's question now. What do you think about the fact that they seeded the clouds 2 days before the Texas Hill Country flood?
So I talked about that briefly right before. So the big misunderstanding is that there's two different sides. Some people say cloud seeding doesn't exist. It does, but not to the extent that people have made it out to be. Cloud seeding only increases the cloud production for rain up to about 20%. And what they did 2 days prior, it didn't stick around. It dissipates so quickly. And I think this comes back to the lack of education and research on it. Yes, it is used to help with farms, but it did not impact this. Had there been absolutely no tropical storm, had there been nothing like that going on, or even in sites, okay, yeah, I could probably see people trying to run with it. But that's not what happened here. There was a heat dome. We thought that the heat dome was going to hold, and it didn't. The heat dome was not as strong as we thought, and that is what allowed that storm to do what it did and to drop as much as it did. What was created or encouraged from the cloud seeding had dissipated long before that storm came in.
Yeah, and you figure with the stationary front, it was stuck. I mean, this stuff just kept going right along the same line for days, and that stationary front. And you know, I used to be the hurricane contact for Sprint. You know, if there was a disaster, that was my job. I watched every hurricane, every ice storm, every tornado, because somebody was going to have to be available for them to replace those poles, to replace those towers, all that stuff. That was my job. I paid attention to it. The group I'm in now is still responsible for that kind of stuff, but on the, we utilize GIS data all the time. They show me the predictions for the hurricanes before, when NOAA gets them.
Right.
We don't, in the community, we don't get that up front. They wait 4 or 5 hours to tell us what's going on.
Correct.
I can get it instantaneously.
Yep.
So, I utilize that data a lot, and a lot of people don't realize how much data there is. You do, but there's a lot of data out there. And if there was something that they could do to reduce a hurricane, hey, I'm all for them trying. They've talked about dropping bombs in there to kind of break them up. I don't know whatever happened to that.
Worth a shot.
Yeah, it's worth a shot, especially if it's not over land and it's only in water and it's not nuclear. Try it. It's not going to hurt anything. Well, it might kill some fish. I'm sorry. It might hurt something. But
then you have the environmental activist side of it that comes into play.
I'm gonna have PETA call me and tell me I'm a PETA. So I got it. But
all the shrimp that roll up on the shore.
Right.
Oh yeah,
I think
just
people
like
also done
fish that died during the snow.
they don't consider gravity and just the way that things flow. Because just because you're not getting a storm, anything upriver, it has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
It's going to go downhill. It's going to go downstream. And just because you're not physically seeing the storm or the initial impact of it doesn't mean that you're not going to get everything else along with it.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to parabugs, knowing the unknown. What about thunderstorms and activity spikes, which we did talk about earlier, but I don't think they were here at that time. And the charge in the ozone might help with boosting paranormal phenomenon, which, like I said, we did talk about.
Yeah.
It does seem to.
Yeah, it does seem to be part of.
I definitely think it does. I think that there's a factor into it, that electromagnetic charge. We'll see it with equipment spiking. We'll see it with activity spiking. I was saying earlier that we sometimes use the Tesla coil when we're doing experiments to create that magnetic charge. I think those are all contributing factors that can add to the activity. So yeah, I definitely think storms have a factor. Then if you just look at the water aspect of it, water is a source of energy. It's a conduit for energy, and you have a lot of that when you have storms.
Yeah. Well, in Florida, there's a statistic out there that you're more likely to get struck by lightning in Florida than anywhere else in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why that is. You would think, on top of a mountain, you might be closer to something happening, because they got lightning rods on top of everything. We're not that far. But yeah, we're really not that far from the.
No, that's why everything is low.
But it's a fact that you've got a bigger chance of being struck by lightning in Florida than attacked by a shark.
I'll take my odds, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going in the ocean. I don't care. But again, like I tell the grandkids all the time, if lightning's within 10 miles, you're not going to be outside.
Right.
Well, and during storms, like, people want to immediately take shelter because nobody wants to get wet unless you're a storm chaser. Then you love being outside when it's, pouring down the monsoon. But for most people, you don't want to get wet. So your first instinct is to seek shelter where it's dry. And when you're outside, people go for canopies, they go for tents, they go for trees. And that's the worst thing that you could do. Like I was saying, when we did our float trip a couple weekends ago, we ended up having to get out. We were on the bank, stuck pretty much in the middle of the river in the middle of the storm. It was lightning up like crazy. And it was either stand on the rocky shore or go into the trees. I will take my chance and stand on the shore. Loving every bit of it, mind you. I was having the time of my life. I don't know if everybody else was, but I was having the time of my life out there in the middle of the storm. And then just with the river. But yeah, I can see it. I can see why it might have a higher chance of being struck. But I still think that anybody has that chance. Really, no matter where you are, nobody can rule it out as a possibility. I mean, we've seen quite a few people being struck by lightning this year.
Oh yeah,
a lot.
I know somebody who got struck by lightning twice. In Missouri. I mean, what are the odds of that? Not very good. But parabugs, Florida is flat. Our highest point is 300 and some odd feet. And it's not that far from where we live. But again, like I said before, it's all downhill from where we live. We're 30 feet above sea level. There's other parts that are 70 feet, whatever. But like I said, there's one little high spot in Florida and it's like 300 feet. We went by it. We went to Ozark. So, but yeah, it is flat. So, and I'm going to get you with Mike's question, Mike Pease. Some of the small towns don't have warning signs. And if we can get eyes on these tornadoes, we can contact the town in its path and warn them of the danger so that they have enough time to get to safety. That's our goal, extreme tornado hunters. Thank you so much for that.
Yep, absolutely. That is the big difference between with being a storm chaser. A lot of people think it's like what you see in the movies, especially with the newest one, Twisters, having come out. We've seen a lot of issues from from that alone. But that's with a lot of movies. When you have come out, people find this new passion and they think it's fun and exciting, and it's the thrill seeking. But what a lot of us are doing is looking at the scientific data. We're trying to get those warnings out. Yeah, there's a lot of places that don't have warnings. Or, you know, you can test sirens a million times and there's going to be that one time when they fail. So, like I was saying earlier, when we had the tornado form over us and it wasn't on radar, storm chasers play a huge role in the fact of being able to relay that information of what's actually happening on the ground to what we're seeing on radar. Because there is that delay, there's that gap, and there's just some things that we can't see. Those radars scan at different levels, at different heights. So what you might see on one scan, you might not see on another. And there's so many different parts that kind of go into this. But yeah, our biggest thing is getting those warnings out there because there's a lot of people that don't have them.
Yeah, and what good does it do you to have a warning system if the tornado takes it out? Which that does happen. And same with they're talking about, you know, flood warning systems. A lot of places have flood warning systems, but like one of the
a lot of places,
congressmen,
very few.
Well, in Texas, there's quite a few. I was reading about it, but the guy said he was a congressman or senator in Texas, and he said we have a warning system. He goes, they test it every month. He goes, but in our house we can't hear it.
Right. Yeah, so that is a big thing that people don't realize is that the outside sirens are not meant to be heard inside. That is why we push so strongly about have multiple ways, especially like the weather radio, whether it be apps on our phones, since we're all connected to those, different storm chasers that you might follow, whatever it might be. Because the sirens outside are only meant to warn people who are outside. They're not meant to be heard indoors.
Right.
And people don't seem to understand that. And to be honest, I'm not sure if in school, if they ever told us that. They're just, if you hear the sirens, take shelter. But I don't think they ever really specified that growing up. And that was something that when I got more involved in this and as I got older, that kind of became more evident that people just didn't understand.
Yeah. And like Susan said the same thing, that they're not meant to be heard inside. But, you know, in the case of this storm that hit down there, they were in a place where cell phone service is minimal.
Right.
You know, they didn't have it. So, you know, I'm going to suggest everybody gets the warning set up on their phone. Yep. Allow your location for that. If nothing else, at least allow it for that and for emergency. Because, you know, what's funny is I get warnings for everything. If our drinking water has to be boiled, I get a warning. You know, and if it's from some place reputable, take it, go with it. You need it. So do that. But we also had a comment from Parabugs, and they said that they're new to storm chasing. And do chasers get a wage from it, or is it more of a hobby? I think it depends on your job. You know, some people, it's a job.
Storm chasing is not what a lot of people think it is. Like, it's all self-funded. Everything is out by, unless you're able to get sponsors or you have a ton of money coming in from your job. I mean, everything is self-funded, which makes it really expensive. So to get paid for it, some are lucky enough to do so. Some get the sponsors, some get the news stations that they're able to partner with. So that's not something that happens overnight.
Just like the paranormal.
Gas alone. Yeah, paranormal the same way. Like, I would love for this to be paying me to do what I do across all platforms. I would love it. But the reality is that that's not how it works. I'm not Zach Baggins. I don't get paid to go into places. I'm, you know,
and you're not Jim Cantori either, right?
Yeah, I'm not him either. And I've worked with a lot of different people across different platforms that do get paid for it. Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely great. But I can tell you that they put a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of schooling into it also. Yeah. Maybe one day I'll get paid to do it. I think the closest thing is that when you have like enough followers and stuff, you can monetize on some of these platforms. Yeah. But that's still tricky. That's still tricky. They're constantly looking to shut you down.
Oh yeah.
You watch Ryan Hall on YouTube?
Yeah.
Max
He's in Pikeville.
Yep. Two of the biggest YouTube meteorologists out there. They do a great job.
Yeah. So I've been lucky enough.
My sister knows his family. My sister knows his family in
Yeah.
Pikeville.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to work with Wicked Weather.
Out there every time I check.
Oh.
I've been lucky enough to work with Wicked Weather and be able to have a lot of opportunities and connections with them. I'm also part of Team Dominator's Storm Search and Rescue, which for most people know who Team Dominator is with Reed Timmer. He's been extremely influential when it comes to weather science. And then we've partnered with the Cajun Navy as well. So TDSR, Team Dominator, and Cajun Navy have all been down in Texas helping with the floods there. We just had some people come home the other day. We've still got people down there helping with efforts as we speak. So those are all amazing organizations. They're amazing groups. I can't stress enough that do your research. If you have questions, reach out, ask. I am always happy to try and answer questions. And if I don't have the answers, like I'm happy to try and find them for you. Storm chasing is not necessarily a safe hobby either.
You need insurance.
You definitely need insurance.
Yes.
And I'll tell you now, insurance is not going to love you if you're constantly getting your windshield busted out and hail damage. They're not. They're not our biggest fans. This site loves us. Insurance does not. So those are just different things to kind of keep in mind there. But the education, don't be afraid to question your sources. If that was any information I could give out there, question your sources, because we see so much false information that goes out and just fear driving for people to raise, whatever and cause issues. Check your sources. That's
we watch
one
it
of our
on
biggest
TV.
things.
We say that a lot about the Weather Channel, that they go off the deep end for a small rainstorm sometimes. So do pay attention, and just because Jim Cantori's in your area, it does not now mean that you're going to be in the worst of it. Paul Goodloe, maybe. He's kind of replaced Jim Cantori. And Mike and Susan, I think that they follow Reed Timmer.
Yeah.
Isn't that his name? Reed Timmer.
Yeah.
And Team Dominator. Because I think they went out storm chasing with them in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
I highly recommend it. If you're new to it, if you're wanting to learn and everything, then I highly suggest not doing it on your own, not doing it by yourself. I really don't encourage people going out there and storm chasing. That's because it's not safe. But if you are chasing, then at least pair up with somebody who knows what they're doing, and that's safe. Because the last thing we want is somebody to get hurt.
Do they have classes in the St. Louis area? Because I know they did in Kansas City.
So the National Weather Service does have a storm spotter course. They have the basic one. It's a free course. So you can go through any of your national, through their website for any of the National Weather Service. There are also two other courses. So you have your advanced and then you have your elite. Elite, though, you have to pass a test after the class in order to get your certification for that. I've done all three of them, so I have my elite as well. But I would highly suggest, it's a lot of really good information. So being able to do that, let's see, who else? There's a ton of courses out there for people to just learn, even just general weather, just so that you can go outside and know what's going on in your area, knowing how to read radar. You don't even have to be chasing, just for your own information. So there's tons of information out there and a ton of classes that are free. Well,
you, though, are in an area where there has been some really good weather people trained right there in St. Louis University. Brian Busby in Kansas City, I think he recently retired. He spoke to us when on one of my Phi Theta Kappa things back in the day when I was doing that. And Joe Loria, they were actually roommates in St. Louis and they ended up becoming the two top weather people in the Kansas City area. But Brian Busby used to be in St. Louis. Yep. So you've got a great school right there for learning weather.
Yep.
Now, we do have a little girl on Fox Weather that went to school with my kids in Lewisburg. And what is her name? The little blonde girl.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
She's really cute. But most of those people went to school over here in Mississippi.
Yep. Penn State is another really good one that has their meteorology certificate and courses that you can do through them. I highly recommend Penn State. SLU is another one. They do St. Louis University. They've got some really good courses, especially in the environmental. Not so much on the meteorology side, but when it comes to the environmental in general, they've got some really good stuff.
Yeah. So, on this wicked weather one, someone say weather, Skywarn, mesoscale. Yes, we have been watching wildlife behaviors. We now know when it's going to rain here, the frogs start croaking, they get all excited, and the squirrels go grab their nuts, and they get up the tree. I mean, I know that sounds funny, but our squirrels here are not fat like they are in Kansas City and the areas now.
We have gangster squirrels. They're pretty mean here.
Oh yeah, we have like 5 different kinds of squirrels around here, and none of them are starving. But right before it rains, they come down and they get all the food and they run back up. Yeah. It's like, okay. And the lizards, they also start making sounds right before it rains. Mm-hmm. And I did not know lizards made sounds. Because I thought it was a frog that was making the sound. So we have frogs, toads, and lizards.
Wildlife is unique in its own way when it comes to both weather and paranormal. Animals in general, we've seen, are super sensitive to both sides. And there's been a couple times when I've been out chasing and I'll drive by a field full of cows and they're just standing there minding their own business. But the moment they start running, that's your cue. You need to find shelter too, because they know what's coming. They know that they need to get out of the way. There was one time I was chasing. I was actually down in Springfield over on Easter. We were chasing a storm system there, and I ended up getting kind of between 2 different areas of rotation. And I remember kind of calling in over our radio to the team. And I'm like, yeah, the cows are starting to run. I think that's my cue that I need to stop. And sure enough, I did. There were two areas that ended up getting some damage that were around me. But had I kept driving, I kept going, I would have gone right into it. So being aware of your surroundings and also knowing what wildlife is doing and how they react to those instances can also kind of give you an idea of what's going on.
Yeah, and if the barn's getting closer to you and you're not moving, that's the time to move. Get the hell away.
Yeah. If you see the tornado and it's not moving, it's just stationary, that's because it's coming right at you.
So, Carl, Ron, do you guys have any questions for Natalie before we end the show tonight?
No, I think they fired quite a few questions at her.
Right. We've answered quite a few, especially in the weather.
And Harvard has a meteorology course that you can take as well. And it, at least you can say that, hey, I went to Harvard afterwards. That's one of the courses I'm looking into as well. But they have a really good program that you can look into. It doesn't cost an arm and a leg. You would think that you would have to, be the smartest person in the world. You don't. It's okay. But it's an affordable program for anybody to be able to do.
Well, why is it animals can pick up on these natural and paranormal events? It's almost like us humans that are disconnected to reality rather than the animals.
Yeah, so I've always been a strong believer. We see young kids are a lot more susceptible to the paranormal and to things around them. And I think that's a big part because we haven't quite gotten to the point where we've told them that, ghosts don't exist. The tooth fairy still exists. The Easter bunny still exists. All these fairy tale creatures exist, but apparently the ghosts don't, which has always floored me. But when kids are open to that and they're not automatically going, oh, well, they told me that doesn't exist, so it doesn't exist. They're open to it. Animals are the same way. We can yell at them all we want, say, no, there's nothing there. if they're seeing something, they're seeing something. I also think that their vision is different than ours. They can see different wavelengths, different than us. So just because we can't physically see it with the naked eye doesn't mean that they can't.
Yeah. Do you have a weather app that you prefer over another?
Yeah, so there's a few. There's a few different ones that we use. Most commonly, Radar Scope. My Radar is a really good one that I've started using. You've also got Omega out there. Okay, sorry, I saw the message that popped up. So those are all really good platforms. I know I was using my Radar earlier. We had a storm roll through before I had to get ready for this. So I was using it. I used Radar Scope. If you are out chasing, I also suggest signing up with the Spotter Network. It'll be able to show your location where you are and kind of pinpoint that also on the map. So I tend to run 3 or 4 different radars at once because I'm comparing what I'm seeing. There's other models like the HRRR, the NAM. Those are all different things that we look at. You can go to the National Weather Service outlooks and you can kind of see the next several days and kind of what's going on there. So just being aware in general is really good. But yeah, I would highly recommend those. I would be amiss if I also didn't say about just following those chasers like us with Wicked Weather, going over and following them. We're constantly putting out information. We're constantly making sure that warnings are going out, and you're getting live accounts. You're seeing firsthand our chasers in the field. Sometimes that's me, sometimes it's others. We're covering, I think like 14, 15 different states right now with our chasers. So we've got people everywhere. We've got a lot of really cool opportunities coming up and things that we're currently working on. But I would highly suggest going, and whether if it's, the Y'all Squad, if it's Retimmer, if it's Wicked Weather, I highly suggest going and following them and getting your updates as well.
We have where we are not too far from Mobile. We're near Pensacola. We don't have good weather here. So we got this guy out of Bruton that does, what's his name? I forget his name, but it's catchy when I remember it. But we watch him sometimes on YouTube because he'll be the only one live when we have crappy weather. Mm-hmm. Very seldom. I mean, unless it's hitting Mobile, they don't really pay attention. But yet all the hurricane hunters leave from Biloxi or down here at Fort Walton at Eglin Air Force Base. Mm-hmm. So, you would think that we would know. And Wicked Weather says 17 states and 66 chasers.
Yep. So, yeah, we have been growing quite rapidly. We've been working on trying to cover as many places as we can so that we're getting those warnings out, especially for those towns that either don't have warning systems or just areas that don't have what they need to get those warnings out. Especially rural, especially because, you've got places where they don't have the best, where they don't have the best internet. They don't have the best telephone service, and they don't know what's happening. Right. So, but everybody knows.
Do you have another show tonight, Carl?
Yeah.
I didn't see it. I didn't see it set up on there. That's why I didn't see it, but that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
So I'm going to say thank you so much, Natalie, for coming on. I'm glad we finally got to be able to reconnect again. I know that I had to cancel back in June when we were supposed to have you on, but it was family related, and you know how that goes, family Absolutely. First. And you understood, and I appreciate that so much. But where can everybody find you?
Sure. So as far as weather's concerned, you can go over to Wicked Weather. We're across all different socials, Facebook most commonly. You've got, for paranormal, Darkly Obscured Paranormal Investigations, or Dopey for short. You can also check out Team Dominator Search and Rescue. Cajun Navy as well. If you're wanting to make any monetary donations for the people in Texas, I highly suggest doing that. Yeah, but otherwise, just even following just my personal on Facebook. You can do Natalie Kreider for paranormal. There's another account that I have that specifically for weather that is under Natalie Shay, SHAY. So that is where a lot of my weather stuff goes. So if you're following on any of those, or you're following directly on the Wicked Weather pages, you'll be able to see our lives, our posts, our warnings, everything.
Yeah, and I have to say, the Cajun Navy, they've been here
everywhere.
They've been here, looking for Trinity and all this stuff, and they did an event to help her out, help her parents out, even though it didn't pan out.
The girl that drowned in Destin.
Yeah, the girl that drowned in Destin.
They do some absolute amazing work.
They do, and I mean, they came up to Kansas City for some things that we had up there as well, some flooding and some tornado stuff. Yeah. I mean, I remember hearing about them, and so if you want to give somebody some donations, those people go a lot of places and do a lot of good.
Yep, and there's a lot of scammers out there right now. A lot of people that are asking for donations that aren't actually going to the people who need it. So going through a reputable source like Cajun Navy is highly recommended.
Yeah, I suggest that as well, because people lie, especially scammers, and so got to think about what's in it for them at that time. But just be aware that we're all praying for all these families, and this is a sad time again. And Texans do stand up for Texans, so we at least have that going on. So thank you so much. Join us here every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Central for Paranormal Nation Radio, Not So Normal. And Carl, you want to finish this up? Since I effed up last night.
You can always find us on the Temple of Phoenix Rising Entertainment's page, Things Network page, and you can find us on Dark Realm TV on the Roku device and Amazon Fire Stick. So always check us out. So everybody have a good evening, and we will see you here next week on Paranormal Nation Radio, Not So Normal. Have a good evening.
Thanks.